Hi there, welcome back. We will now look at the next topic. Again, we continue to look at mappings. This session will also cover mappings and advanced mapping functions like refactoring your message mappings, using variables in your message mapping, returning XMLs in your message mappings, doing RFC lookups in your message mapping, and so on. Okay, so this is going to be another extended session where we look at mapping as the main focus. So without further ado, let's look at the first topic, refactoring of message mapping. So rather than explain it theoretically, let me go ahead and jump into the system and show you an example of refactoring. Right? I'll close all our objects here, and now I'll go into the content conversion exercise that we did yesterday, right? And the content conversion the content conversion exercise for ICOs, right? If you remember yesterday, for the integrated configuration, before that, let's open the message mapping for integrated configuration. We went in and changed the occurrence as 0 to unbounded. And when we did that, we got a lot of warnings, which meant we had to redo our entire mapping. Now, is that the only way to do it? Is that the only way we want to do it? Actually, there's a better way to do it, and that's where refactoring of message mapping comes into picture. So let's take this example of our file to IDOC scenario for the content conversion, the classical content conversion that we did yesterday. Okay, and let's go that we did in our previous session rather, and let's go into the signature tab. Right now, within the signature tab, you have the request message type and you have an external message type, right? Let's go ahead and change the occurrence as 0 to unbounded. And when I do that, and when I go into my definition tab, you see there are warnings that have come, and as a part of that warnings, along with that warnings, it says, hey, there's so many mappings and all of this has gotten skipped. So close, and when I say close, you just watch for this icon, which has now come out as a new icon, right? So this icon is a new icon which came because of this structural inconsistencies. Let's do this one more time. I'll say do not save. I'm going to message mapping. Okay. Now at the definition, you don't see that additional icon that we just showed. Going to edit tab. This is the message mapping for content conversion for a file to IDOC scenario using a classical configuration. I'm going into end and changing the occurrence as 0 to unbounded. When I do that, I will get issues and warnings saying, hey, all the mappings are going to go away because I've changed the structure, right? And then there's this new button here. What is this new button? It's called, hey, correct your structural inconsistency. Is that so? Yesterday we went ahead and redid the mapping, but there's actually a better way to do that, right? I'll click on it. I'll click on this new button that has come, and it says, hey, the field that has gone missing as a result of the structural changes, order05.idoc. And then it automatically intelligently identifies that, hey, I see an order05.idoc. Is this missing field to be replaced with this field? You can say yes, move. And if you say move, the next error is again, it says, hey, idoc source 0 set, record set has gone missing. And is this the record set? Yes, this is definitely the record set. I say move. And with that, you see, all my mappings are retained and I'm back in business. So this is what is called refactoring of message mappings. The refactoring of message mappings enables PI to provide you with alternates. When you change your structure, PI will immediately tell you, hey, you made a structure and I can help you fix the issues. So you need not rebuild your mapping ground up one more time, but using the refactoring option, you can then choose the various options that PI provides and use that. So there's some amount of intelligence in PI where it is able to tell you, hey, the mapping is lost, but I can help you fix the mapping. So that concept is called refactoring of message mappings. Okay, so let's look at one more example. So let's assume that this was the others mapping. In the others mapping, you had first name, last name, designation, street 1, street 2, and so on, right? And everything was hunky-dory, and then you went ahead and made a change where you introduced this address segment. This address was not there before. You introduced this address segment, which meant all the mapping for street 1, street 2 and all of that get lost. By using an refactoring of your mapping, you can implicitly tell PI that, hey, PI will immediately say, hey, I see this new field called street 1. Do you want me to replace this mapping and so on? And once you do that, your PI's mapping will be fixed. Okay, so with that, we've covered the first topic that we wanted to look at, that was refactoring of mappings. Let's look at the next topic, right? Variables. How do I define a variable in PI and use it somewhere in PI? And what do we mean by variable that? Okay. Let's do one thing, right? Just give me a second. Okay, let's close this. Let's open our Java mapping namespace, and now within the Java mapping namespace, let's define a message type, right? Let's define a message mapping. I'm going to go into my Java mapping namespace, and I'm defining a message type underscore variable demo, right? I'm creating a message mapping called variable demo, and now I'm seeing that message type, my message type source is my source message type, and message type target is my target message type, right? Now assume that you need to use the concatenated first name and last name at multiple locations. Even though here you just have one field, assume that you want to use that at multiple locations during the mapping. So what you can do is you can right click on your target message and say add variable. So I'm right clicking on the root node and saying add variable. It's asking me for the variable name. You can call that var for, oops, sorry, I didn't enter very fast, so I'm going to delete it. I'm saying right click, add variable, I'll say var underscore full name, right? And then I'm going to double click on the var full name. It's going to ask me for the mapping rules for this. I'm going to say source target, and I'm going to do a concat. So I'm going to call the concat here under my text functions. I'm dragging first name, I'm dragging last name, I'm putting it against the variable full name, and with that my mapping is done. My variable full name mapping is done. Now instead of again doing the variable full name, what I can do is for my full name, all I need to do is drag this variable full name here, and once I drag it here, my variable is now going to get assigned to this particular guy. So the idea, now let's execute it. Let's just put in a value. Let's call it John Doe and execute it. And you see the output. Let's expand the output. It's John Doe. So the idea is your variable got executed. Now at the trace level, let's set it all, and we will see what happens in the runtime, right? So at the end of it, it adds, you don't see the fact that the variable got calculated, but then at the end of it, it puts the value full name as well, John Doe there. Okay, so the idea of a variable is, now what if there was another 10, there were other 10 places where you had to do the same thing. Instead of having to do a concatenate function multiple times, what you could have done is you would just define it to the variable and use the variable multiple places. So that way, the idea is it makes your mapping much more easier to maintain. Okay, with that, I'm going to reject change. I don't want to activate this change. With that, we are done with this topic as well, and this is called graphical variables, where we'll deal with it. You are able to reuse them in multiple locations in the target, and they are also better for performance because you are executing a complicated logic once and then you are using it multiple places rather than re-execute that logic multiple times. How do you add variable? You right click on the target, you say add variable, it will ask you for the name, you just use assign it and then drag it and drop it. Okay, now let's look at the next example that we want. Copy an entire XML subtree. Okay, what does this mean? Let's look at it. Sorry, I am looking for an example. Okay, let's open our file to file scenario for an integrated configuration, right? Let's open that message mapping and see what it has. All right, okay, that's perfect. I think I got what I'm going to do, but let's look at it. So this is my message mapping. Okay, it doesn't have an input payload, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to get my input payload. Okay, let's first go into edit mode and add this payload. So how do I add a test case? Create this. It's asking me for a test instance. Say test name as 1. Okay, go into the source and save. Yes, and save your mapping. Okay, oops, there's an issue. The reason for the issue is that the namespace is different, so let's go ahead and change the namespace as well. Sorry. Okay, now I go here. Alright, I'll save. Yes, replace, save. Alright, now let's execute the mapping. Alright, my mapping has gotten executed. Okay, so now we have the qualifications getting created multiple times, right? Now let's do one thing. I'm just going to do one minimum change. I'm going to, instead of doing it like this, let's just go ahead. My qualifications mapping, I'm going to change it. I'm going to use qualifications here again. I'm going to copy it here and I say return as XML. Okay, and let's see what happens. So what's going to happen is, let's execute. My mapping got executed. Let's look at qualifications, and here you see qualifications has qualification again. Again qualification has qualification. So whatever was the input was added to the D. So the copy XML's use is to take an input structure and then whatever is the underneath XML, it just gets copied over here. So when I did qualifications of copy, it has just copied whatever was, beneath it down and copied that out. Okay, so let's look at it in another example out here, right? So if you look at it, look at the structure here, right? I have first name, last name, and then I have something called address, and I have multiple fields here, street 1, street 2, pin code and all that. And here I just have something called the delivery address, and I map this address and address to this delivery address, and I told return as XML. So what happens in the output? Within the delivery address, whatever is the address data gets posted out here. So the entire data is treated as an XML and is put up out here. So that is what is called copy an entire XML subtree. Okay. So far the three tricks that we looked at are refactoring your message mappings, using variables in your message mapping, and returning your entire XML as a tree. Now the next topic that we will be looking at is a parameterized mapping, or also called as a lookup. So let's take an example of a parameterized mapping. All right.